Have you ever stopped to think about the weight of carrying the guilt of something you never did? Imagine waking up every day and people looking at you with fear, not because of who you are, but because of who your father was. This is Piccolo's reality in Dragon Ball Z. When Piccolo was born, he was already doomed. His father, King Piccolo, spread terror and destruction across the world. And when Goku defeated the villain, he spat out an egg before dying, and from that egg our Piccolo was born. But here's the cruel detail. Technically, he is his father's reincarnation. Same essence, same memories of hatred. But is he the same person? Piccolo spent his entire life trying to prove he wasn't the monster people expected him to be. And the way he did it reveals one of the most profound truths in psychology. We are not our traumas, we are not our origins, and we can choose who we want to be. But what about the path he took to this redemption? It will make you rethink everything about inherited guilt, forgiveness, and personal transformation. Before continuing, if you want to understand more about the psychology behind your favorite anime, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Seriously, think about it. How many channels do you know that truly delve into the minds of the characters, showing how they deal with trauma, guilt, and transformation the way we do in real life? This content can help you understand not only Piccolo, but also your own inner struggles. And if you don't subscribe now, you'll miss out on analyses like this that no one else is doing. So hit that red button, like it, and let's go on this journey together. Let's start from the beginning, because Piccolo's story is really the story of someone who was born hated before he even had the chance to make any choices. When King Piccolo was defeated by Goku, he used his last moments of life to spit out an egg. And from this egg, the Piccolo we know was born. But here's the problem. This new Piccolo wasn't exactly a son in the traditional sense. He was a reincarnation, carrying his father's memories, power, and hatred. It was as if King Piccolo had reset and returned as a new version of himself. Now think about the psychological pressure of that. From the very first moment of his life, Piccolo had memories of being a terrible villain. He remembered killing people, spreading fear, fighting Goku. But at the same time, he hadn't experienced any of that. It was like having the memory of crime someone else committed, but everyone blaming you as if you had done it. This is called inherited guilt in psychology. It's when you carry the weight of actions that weren't yours, but that somehow connect to you, whether through family, origins, or in Piccolo's case, literally because you're the reincarnation of the person who did it. And here's the cruelest part. Society, the people around you, they don't care if you're technically a new person. To them, you are the villain. When Piccolo first appears in Dragon Ball Z, he's still in this phase of identity confusion. He sees himself as the heir to his father's evil legacy. He wants to avenge Daimyo's death. He trains with a single goal, to defeat Goku and dominate the world, just as his previous self wanted. But here's where something interesting begins. Even with all this programmed hatred, Piccolo already shows himself to be different. He's more strategic, more calculating, less impulsive than his father. He doesn't kill for pleasure. He kills because he thinks that's what he should do. It's almost as if he's following a script written for him, but without questioning whether that's what he truly wants. This reflects a psychological concept called self-fulfilling prophecy, a self-fulfilling prophecy. When everyone tells you you're the villain, when you yourself believe you were born to be the villain, you end up acting like the villain. Not because it's your true nature, but because it's the only role you've been allowed to play. The biggest turning point in Piccolo's life comes with the arrival of the Saiyans, Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta. Suddenly, a threat so great that even mortal enemies must unite appears. And that's when Goku does something unexpected. He proposes an alliance with Piccolo. Think of the courage this requires on both sides. Goku is trusting the man who swore to kill him. And Piccolo is agreeing to fight alongside the man who killed his previous self. But they do it because there's something bigger at stake, Earth's survival. During the fight against Raditz, something fundamental happens. Goku dies. And before he dies, he asks Piccolo to train his son, Gohan. Let this sink in. The guy who killed your father is dying, and he entrusts you, the villain's reincarnation, to train and protect his son. This is so psychologically powerful that Piccolo is completely disconcerted. For the first time in his life, someone saw something beyond the villain in him. Goku saw the potential for change. And Piccolo accepts. Not out of kindness at first, but because it makes strategic sense. They'll need Gohan to face the other Saiyans. But here begins his true transformation. When Piccolo begins training Gohan, something unexpected happens. They form a bond. Gohan is a frightened child, cast into the desert to survive alone. And Piccolo, who never had a childhood, who was never a child, who was born an adult with memories of hatred. He begins to feel something strange. Something he's never experienced before. Empathy. At first he's harsh, cold, and distant. He throws Gohan into extreme situations to force him to awaken his power. But little by little, you see small moments of care. When Gohan is in real danger, Piccolo intervenes. When Gohan is scared, Piccolo stays close. He tries to maintain the facade of a cruel mentor, but underneath, something is changing. There is a concept in psychology called repair. It's when you try to repair past damage through positive actions in the present. And that's exactly what's happening with Piccolo, even if he doesn't consciously realize it. He never had the chance to be a child, never received care, never received love. And now, by caring for Gohan, he's unconsciously trying to give this child everything he never had. But the defining moment, the moment that marks Piccolo's complete transformation, occurs during the fight against Nappa. The Saiyan strikes Gohan with a deadly blow and Piccolo throws himself in the way. He, born to be the villain who spent years plotting revenge, who carried his father's hatred, sacrifices himself to save a child. And as he's dying in Gohan's arms, he says something devastating. He says that Gohan was the only friend he ever had. Think about that. A lifetime of loneliness, of being feared, of being the monster. And a 4-year-old was the first person who treated him like someone worthy of affection. This sacrifice reveals the deepest truth about Piccolo. He was never the villain everyone thought he would be. He just needed someone to believe in him, someone who saw him as a person, not as his father's shadow. After Piccolo is revived by the Dragon Balls, something fundamental changes in him. He doesn't return as the villain he once was. He returns as someone who has experienced something King Piccolo never had, genuine connection with another human being. And that changes everything. When he returns from Namek, Piccolo no longer sees himself as the demon's reincarnation. He sees himself as Piccolo, a unique person with his own choices, his own identity. And this is huge from a psychological standpoint. He's finally managed to separate himself from his father's shadow. But here's the interesting thing. Even though he's redeemed himself, even though he's proven his worth, Piccolo can never completely escape his past. People still fear him. They still look at him with suspicion. And he accepts this with a quiet dignity that's heartbreaking. There is a concept in psychology called social stigma. It's when you carry a mark, a label that society has placed on you, and even when you change, people still see you through that label. Piccolo experiences this every day. He's saved the Earth multiple times, created deep bonds with the Z fighters, but that invisible barrier still exists. Observe his interactions with the other characters. He's never fully included in parties or celebrations. When there's a barbecue at Kame House, Piccolo stands aside, watching from afar. Not because the others push him away, but because he puts himself in that position. What? Because he's internalized the idea that he doesn't fully deserve to be part of that group, that family. This is what we call internalized guilt. Even when the people around you forgive you, you can't forgive yourself. Piccolo carries a burden that no one else is asking of him, but he feels he must continue to carry it. It's as if he feels he needs to earn his place, constantly proving that he's no longer the villain, even though he's already proven it 1,000 times. His relationship with Gohan remains the emotional center of his journey. As Gohan grows, Piccolo becomes more than a mentor, he becomes a father figure. And here's something both beautiful and tragic. Piccolo never had a father, never had a family, but he becomes the best father possible for Gohan when Goku isn't around. He trains Gohan, protects Gohan, believes in Gohan in a way that even Goku himself sometimes fails to do. When Gohan needs to awaken his power against Cell, it's Piccolo's voice that echoes in his mind. It's Piccolo's training, Piccolo's trust, that gives Gohan the emotional foundation to become the strongest warrior in the universe at that moment. And the most beautiful thing? Piccolo never asks for recognition for this. He never demands gratitude. He just cares. Because that's what people who love do. And Piccolo learned to love through Gohan. There is a psychological theory, calogenerativity versus stagnation, proposed by Erik Erikson. It states that in adulthood, we find meaning through contributing to the next generation, whether by raising children, mentoring others, or leaving a positive legacy. And Piccolo finds his purpose precisely in this. In raising Gohan, he finds redemption. He transforms his father's cycle of destruction into one of growth and protection. But let's talk about a specific moment that shows how much Piccolo has changed. The Buu saga. When all seems lost, when Buu is destroying everything and everyone, Piccolo has the opportunity to fuse with other Namekians to increase his power. But he hesitates. Why? Because he's afraid of losing his identity again. Think about it. He spent his entire life building who he is, separating himself from his father's identity, creating his own personality, his own values. And now, the idea of merging with someone else and potentially losing part of who he's become, it terrifies him. It shows how precious his individual identity has become to him. This reflects what we call in psychology fear of self-annihilation, the fear of losing who you are. And for someone like Piccolo who fought so hard to become someone, this fear makes perfect sense. Another fascinating thing about Piccolo is how he handles power. Unlike Vegeta, who is obsessed with being the strongest, unlike Goku, who loves the challenge of fighting, Piccolo sees power as a tool of protection. He trains not to be number one, but to be strong enough to protect those he loves. This is a much more mature way of approaching power. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He doesn't have a fragile ego that needs validation. He simply wants the ability to make a difference when necessary. And this is in complete contrast to Daimao Piccolo, who wanted power for power's sake, dominance for dominance's sake. The son completely broke his father's mold. As the sagas progress, Piccolo gradually becomes less relevant in terms of raw power. The Scions reach levels he can't keep up with. And this could be frustrating for him, it could make him feel inadequate. But watch his reaction, he accepts it. He finds other ways to contribute, through strategy, through wisdom, through emotional support. This demonstrates incredible emotional maturity. He doesn't need to be the protagonist. He doesn't need to be the strongest. He just needs to do his part, and that's enough for him. That's true self-esteem, not based on comparison with others, but based on knowing your own worth independent of external rankings. There's a scene in Dragon Ball Super that perfectly sums up who Piccolo has become. When he's meditating and is interrupted, instead of reacting angrily as he would in the past, he simply accepts it patiently. This small moment demonstrates decades of personal growth. He's found inner peace. He's no longer fighting himself, his past, or other people's expectations. And you know what's most incredible? Piccolo never had therapy, never had a psychologist, never had anyone to guide him through this healing process. He did it all on his own, through actions, through conscious choices, through allowing himself to connect with others. He is proof that transformation is possible, no matter how dark the beginning. Piccolo's journey teaches us something fundamental. You are not your past, you are not your origins, you are not what they made you, you are your choices. Every day he woke up and chose to be better. Every day he chose to protect instead of destroy. Every day he chose connection instead of isolation. And through these consistent choices, he not only changed his own life, he changed how the entire universe saw him. Now I want to know from you, what do you think so far? Leave your comment below. Have you ever felt judged for something that wasn't your fault? Do you know someone who carries the burden of mistakes other people have made? Or perhaps you identify with Piccolo in some other way. Comment below, we want to hear your story. Your experience can help others going through the same thing. And look, your comments really help me continue bringing you content like this. So don't be shy, share what you're feeling below. Now let's delve into something many people don't realize about Piccolo. He's actually one of the loneliest characters in Dragon Ball. And this loneliness isn't accidental. It's a conscious choice based on deep trauma. Think about it. Piccolo is the only one of his kind on Earth. He has no family in the traditional sense. He doesn't date, he doesn't have biological children, he doesn't have siblings. He exists in a state of permanent isolation that he himself constructed as a defense mechanism. In psychology, this is called self-imposed isolation, when you distance yourself from people not because they reject you, but because you're afraid of being rejected, or because you don't believe you deserve connection. Piccolo does this constantly. Even when he's invited to social events, he stays on the periphery, observing from afar. But here's the cruel detail. He wants to belong. You see it in the little moments, when he watches others laugh together, when he hesitates before leaving a meeting, when he stands just a little closer to the group than he usually does. He wants to belong, but he's afraid to take that full step. Why does this fear exist? Because deep down, Piccolo still carries the wound of being born hated. That child, or rather, that newborn being, who came into the world and was immediately seen as a monster. That pain has never completely healed. It's like a scar on the soul that never fully heals. This is what we call primary rejection wound when you experience rejection very early in life, and in Piccolo's case literally at birth, it profoundly shapes how you relate to the world. You develop emotional armor, a safe distance, because deep down you're always expecting to be rejected again. And the saddest part? Even when people show genuine acceptance, you can't quite believe it. It's as if your mind says, they're just being polite. If they really knew me, if they remembered what I was, they would reject me. Even though that's not true. Look at Piccolo's relationship with the other Z fighters. They clearly respect him, value him, and rely on him. But Piccolo never feels completely part of the group. He's their ally, their battle companion, but not their close friend. And that's his choice, not theirs. There's a revealing moment in Dragon Ball Super when everyone is preparing for the Tournament of Power. Goku personally recruits each fighter, spends time with them, jokes around, and talks. But with Piccolo? It's more direct, more formal. Not because Goku doesn't like him, but because Piccolo has never allowed that casual closeness he has with others. This brings us to another crucial psychological point. Self-fulfilling prophecy in relationships. Piccolo is afraid of not belonging, so he acts distant, which makes people distance themselves from him as well, which confirms his original fear of not belonging. It's a cycle he perpetuates without realizing it. But here's the interesting thing. Despite all this emotional distance, Piccolo is extremely loyal. Once he considers you part of his circle, even if it's a circle with high walls, he'd do anything for you. He'd sacrifice himself, fight to the death, give his all. This combination of emotional distance and absolute loyalty is typical of people who have what we call avoidant attachment style. These are people who want connection but are afraid of it, so they express love through practical actions, protecting, helping, being physically present, rather than emotional intimacy, hugs, words of affirmation, vulnerability. Let's talk about Piccolo's constant meditation. He spends hours meditating, alone, in silence. On the surface it looks like just training. But psychologically it's much more than that, it's emotional regulation. Piccolo uses meditation as a way to process his intense emotions without having to share them with anyone. It's a form of self-healing, self-control, and maintaining inner peace without relying on external validation. And this is simultaneously healthy and sad. Healthy because he's found a tool that works for him, sad because it reflects how he still doesn't feel comfortable processing emotions with other people. There's an interesting contrast between Piccolo and Vegeta in this sense. Vegeta also has a dark past, he also struggled with redemption. But Vegeta eventually allows intimacy. He marries, has children, raises a family. He opens up that part of himself. Piccolo never does. He remains in that middle space between ally and friend, never completely cold but never completely open. Why this difference? Because Piccolo's wound is different. Vegeta was raised to be a prince, to be valued, even if toxically. Piccolo was raised to be hated. Vegeta lost his value. Piccolo never felt he had any value to lose. And this fundamental difference explains why it's so much harder for Piccolo to allow himself intimate connections. There's a scene that always gets me. When Pan, Gohan's daughter, is born, Piccolo goes to visit her. He holds the baby with surprising tenderness, and you see a mix of tenderness and sadness on his face. It's as if he's thinking, this child will never see me as a monster. She'll grow up knowing me as Uncle Piccolo, protector of the family. This represents hope for him. The new generation doesn't carry the prejudices of the previous one. Pan knows nothing about Piccolo Daimyo, about the terror he spread. To her, Piccolo is just the family's green friend who's always been there. And this, in a strange way, is the most complete redemption he could have. This illustrates a powerful psychological concept. Resignification through new generations. Sometimes, complete healing doesn't come from changing the minds of the people who judged you. It comes from creating new relationships where that judgment never existed in the first place. Now, here's something you need to understand about Piccolo's journey, and that's why I need you to stay until the end of this video. His story isn't over yet. What I'm going to show you in the next few minutes will reveal how all this suffering, all this isolation, all this struggle for redemption connects to something much bigger. Something that explains not only Piccolo but perhaps even your own internal struggles. Because in the end, the question isn't, did Piccolo redeem himself? The real question is, when do we stop punishing ourselves for things we never did? And the answer will surprise you. So stay with me until the end because what comes next will change how you see not only this character but how you see yourself. Let's talk about something that deeply defines who Piccolo is. His relationship with the concept of family. And here, family doesn't mean blood, it means choice. Piccolo never had a traditional family. He literally doesn't have a mother. His father was technically himself in another life. He didn't grow up surrounded by affection, care, or family moments. Everything he knows about family he learned from the outside, like a stranger looking through the window of a brightly lit house. And you know what's fascinating? Even without ever experiencing family, he becomes one of the best family members in the series. He instinctively understands what it means to care, protect, and be present. The answer lies in a psychological concept called vicarious learning, the ability to learn by observing others, without having to experience them directly. Piccolo watched Goku with Gohan when Goku was alive, watched Chi-Chi caring for her children, watched Krillin and A-Team building a family. And through these observations he internalized what familial love means. But he does something perhaps even more impressive: he improves on the model. Piccolo doesn't blindly repeat what he sees, he adapts, he improves. He sees the flaws of the other parents, especially Goku's, let's be honest, and compensates. When Goku dies and then chooses to stay in the other world to train instead of returning to his family, Piccolo is there for Gohan. When Goku puts Gohan in dangerous situations because he believes in his potential without considering his emotional well-being, Piccolo balances this by being the voice of reason and care. This shows something profound about character. You don't need to have had a good childhood to be a good father/mentor. You don't need to have received love to know how to give love. Piccolo is living proof of that. You can break cycles even when those cycles are all you know. There's a specific moment that perfectly illustrates this. In the Cell Saga, when Gohan is fighting, Goku realizes that Gohan doesn't enjoy fighting as much as he thought. Piccolo is the first to confront Goku about it. He essentially says, "You're not seeing your son for real. You're projecting your own desires onto him." This takes enormous courage. Confronting Goku, the guy who saved you from a life of hatred, the guy who is literally the savior of the universe multiple times over. But Piccolo does it because right now, being loyal to Gohan is more important than being polite to Goku. This is called active unconditional love. It's not just feeling love, it's acting on that love even when it's uncomfortable, even when it creates conflict. And Piccolo does this consistently. As Gohan grows up and eventually has a family of his own, something beautiful happens. Piccolo becomes an honorary grandfather. He trains Pan just as he trained Gohan. And he observes this continuity. He's creating a legacy of protection and care that passes from generation to generation. He, who came from a legacy of destruction, created a completely opposite legacy. From a psychological point of view, this is what we call successful generativity. Leave the world better than you found it through your influence on future generations. And few characters in Dragon Ball do this as well as Piccolo. Now, let's talk about another crucial aspect of Piccolo's psychology: his relationship with cultural identity and belonging. Piccolo is Namekian, but he grew up on Earth. He didn't know any others of his kind until he traveled to Namek. So he existed in this strange space of not being human, but also not having a Namekian community. He was essentially culturally displaced. This resonates deeply with the experience of many people in the real world: second-generation immigrants, adoptees who grew up in cultures different from their own, anyone who exists between two worlds without feeling like they fully belong in either. When Piccolo finally goes to Namek and meets others of his kind, there's an interesting scene. The Namekians treat him warily. They know who he is, they know where he came from. And even among his own kind, he's the odd one out, the different one, the one carrying a dark past. But here's the growth. Piccolo doesn't try to force belonging. He doesn't try to prove anything to the Namekians. He simply is himself. And eventually, through actions, through character, he earns their respect. Not because he changed who he is, but because he demonstrated who he is. This teaches us something powerful. Authentic belonging doesn't come from trying to fit in. It comes from being genuinely yourself until you find people who value just that. Piccolo's fusion with Kami is another psychologically fascinating moment. Kami was literally the good half of the original Namekian who split himself to become Earth's guardian. So when Piccolo and Kami fuse again, they theoretically become whole. But notice what happens. Even after the fusion, it's Piccolo's personality that dominates, not Kami's. Piccolo retains his identity, his memories, his way of being. He merely gained Kami's powers and knowledge, but he didn't lose who he had become. This is symbolic of something profound. True psychological integration. It's not about erasing parts of who you are, it's about incorporating new aspects while maintaining your essence. Piccolo has integrated the good part without losing the complexity, the depth, even the darkness that made him who he is. In Jungian psychology, this would be the process of individuation, becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self, including the shadows. Piccolo does this literally, and the result is not a perfect saint. He is a complex, complete, real person. Another crucial point: Piccolo is one of the few characters who ages emotionally realistically. While Goku remains eternally childish in an adorable but still childish way, and Vegeta gets stuck in cycles of wounded pride, Piccolo truly matures. He becomes more patient over time, wiser, more comfortable with his limitations. He stops trying to prove something and starts simply being. This is real emotional growth. There's a scene in Dragon Ball Super where he's babysitting Pan and he just plays with her. He makes faces, lets her pull his antenna, smiles in his serious way, but still. This Piccolo didn't exist at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z. That Piccolo would never allow this kind of vulnerability, this open display of affection. This shows what psychology calls psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt his behavior based on the context, without losing his essence. Piccolo can be the serious warrior, the strict mentor, and also the loving uncle. He contains multitudes. And perhaps most importantly, Piccolo develops something that many characters never develop: genuine self-acceptance. He doesn't love everything about his past, but he accepts it. He no longer hates himself for being born the way he was. He has made peace with his origins. This doesn't mean the pain has disappeared. It means he's learned to carry that pain without letting it define him. And that, honestly, is the most mature way to deal with trauma. Not erasing it, but integrating it, giving it a place in your story without letting it write all the future chapters. Now we need to talk about an aspect of Piccolo that is less obvious, but extremely significant. His relationship to masculinity and what it means to be strong. In Dragon Ball, strength is usually measured in fighting power, energy levels, and transformations. But Piccolo represents a different kind of strength. Emotional strength, strength of character, strength of conviction. Think of how many times Piccolo could have given in to anger, resentment, and wounded pride. He spends most of the series less powerful than the Saiyans. He watches Goku and Vegeta reach heights he can't reach. This could easily breed bitterness, envy, and inadequacy. But he doesn't. Why? Because Piccolo has redefined for himself what it means to be strong. For him, strength isn't about being number one, it's about be reliable, be consistent, be the rock on which others can lean. This contrasts sharply with the toxic masculinity we see in some characters. Vegeta, for example, spends entire sagas obsessed with surpassing Goku, with proving his worth through power. He measures his masculinity, his value as a person, through competitive comparisons. Piccolo doesn't do that. He doesn't need to be the alpha. He doesn't need to dominate. He's secure enough in his identity to be the support, the background, the strategist, the mentor. And that requires a kind of strength that many men never develop. In psychology, we call this mature masculinity, the ability to be strong without being domineering, to be competent without being competitive, to have power without needing to exercise it over others. Piccolo embodies this perfectly. Also notice how he handles emotions. He doesn't suppress them completely, which would be unhealthy repression, but he also doesn't let them take over, which would be dysregulation. He feels deeply. You see this when Gohan is in danger, when he loses someone important, but he processes those emotions productively. When he's upset, he meditates. When he's worried, he acts. When he's afraid, he faces it. That healthy emotional regulation recognizes feelings without being enslaved by them. And here's something many men struggle with. Piccolo allows for selective vulnerability. He's not an open book, he has boundaries, he has emotional walls. But with the right people, especially Gohan, he lets them see behind those walls. He trusts enough to be seen. This is true emotional balance. Not being completely closed off but also not being completely unprotected. Having discernment about when and with whom to be vulnerable. Let's talk about Piccolo's sacrifice in the Frieza saga, when he's killed protecting the Namekians. Unlike the first sacrifice, saving Gohan, this one has no audience. Gohan isn't there to see it. Goku isn't there. It's just Piccolo doing what's right because it's right, not because it will gain recognition. This illustrates what we call true moral integrity. Do the right thing even when no one is looking, even when you won't be recognized. Your moral code doesn't depend on an external audience. It's internal, it's part of who you are. Comparing this to Piccolo Daimyo is revealing. The demon did evil publicly, wanting everyone to see his power, his terror. He defined himself through the reactions of others. Piccolo, son/reincarnation, does good silently, he doesn't need applause. He defines himself through his own inner values. That's an internal locus of control, when your self-esteem, your values, your sense of identity come from within, not from external validation. And developing this is one of the greatest psychological challenges anyone faces. Another fascinating aspect. Piccolo is one of the few characters who truly learns from his mistakes. When he first trains Gohan, he's excessively harsh, leaving a 4-year-old child to survive alone in the desert. It's almost cruel. But when he trains Pan years later, he's completely different. Still rigorous, still challenging, but with much more balance, much more consideration for her emotional well-being. He's learned that strength doesn't come from trauma, it comes from challenge balanced with support. This demonstrates capacity for self-reflection and adjustment, the ability to look at your own actions, recognize flaws, and change your behavior. Many people never develop this. They repeat the same mistakes because they never stop to truly examine their actions critically. Let's talk about a more subtle aspect: Piccolo's choice to remain single/without a romantic partner. In a series where almost everyone eventually gets married or has relationships, Piccolo remains alone in this sense. This could be seen as sad, but it could also be seen as a valid life choice. Piccolo has found fulfillment through other forms of connection: mentoring, deep friendship, chosen family. He doesn't need a romantic relationship to feel complete. In society, there's enormous pressure, especially on men, to must have a partner, build a traditional family, etc. Piccolo challenges this. He shows that there are multiple paths to a meaningful and fulfilling life. This doesn't mean he's incapable of love. Quite the opposite, he loves deeply, just not romantically. And recognizing that different types of love have equal value is emotional maturity. There's one detail about Piccolo that's easy to miss. He never needed a formal redemption arc. There was no moment where everyone came together and said, "Okay, you're forgiven now." His redemption was gradual, earned through consistent actions over years. This is more realistic than many redemption arcs in fiction. In real life, change doesn't happen in one big cathartic moment. It happens in 1,000 small choices, in consistency over time, in showing through behavior, not words, who you really are. Piccolo never said, "I've changed, trust me." He simply changed, and let his actions speak for themselves. And eventually, without anyone making an official announcement, everyone knew. He was no longer the villain. He never really had been. This aligns with psychological research on behavior change. Sustainable change comes from consistent changes in behavior patterns, not from grand statements or promises. Piccolo embodies this perfectly. Another point: Piccolo is one of the most self-sufficient characters in the series. He doesn't need Dragon Balls to become strong. He doesn't need external mentors, after the beginning. He doesn't need shortcuts. He develops his power through discipline, meditation, and solitary training. This represents psychological self-sufficiency, the ability to find resources within yourself, to be your own teacher, your own motivator. It's a form of strength that our society often underestimates because it's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's deep and lasting. Piccolo also demonstrates something rare: comfort with silence. He doesn't need to fill every moment with words. He can simply be silently present. And ironically, this silent presence often communicates more than words ever could. When Gohan is suffering, Piccolo doesn't give a big motivational speech. He just stands there, present. And that presence says, "You're not alone. I'm here. You can handle this." Sometimes that's exactly what someone needs. Let's now delve into a philosophical question that Piccolo forces us to confront. When does someone really change? When does that change become real? Technically speaking, Piccolo is Daimyo Piccolo. Same DNA, same original memories, same essence. So theoretically, if he's literally the same entity, how can we say he's different? The answer lies in a deeper understanding of identity. You are not your memories, you are not your past, you are not even your DNA, you are your choices. And Piccolo made radically different choices than Daimyo did. There's a philosophical thought experiment called the ship of Theseus. If you replace each plank of a ship, one by one, until no original planks remain, is it still the same ship? Piccolo is this question personified. He began with the demon's memories and essence. But over the years, each plank was replaced. Each new memory replaced the weight of the old. Each good choice rewrote the pattern of bad choices. Each moment of love eroded the legacy of hate. Until eventually, almost nothing of King Piccolo remained except his physical form. So when exactly did he stop being the villain? It wasn't at a specific moment. It was a gradual process of continuous death and rebirth. Every day the old Piccolo died a little more, and a new Piccolo was born in his place. This has profound implications for how we understand human change. It means that no matter how dark your past, no matter what you've done or been, you have the ability to become someone fundamentally different through consistent choices over time. But, and this is an important but, this doesn't erase the past. Piccolo never forgets where he came from. He carries those memories, that history. The difference is that he doesn't let go of it to define his future. He integrates the past without being imprisoned by it. This is what psychology calls narrative coherence, the ability to have a life story that includes dark chapters, but that shows growth, change, and development. Your story isn't, "Everything was always bad," or, "None of this matters, I'm totally new." It's, "This happened, it was terrible, I was this, and through hard work I became this." Let's talk about one aspect that sets Piccolo apart from almost every other character. He never gives up on anyone. Even when everyone thinks someone is irredeemably evil, Piccolo hesitates to make that final judgment. Why? Because he knows from experience that people can change, that appearances can be deceiving, that there's a difference between who someone is and who someone could become. This doesn't mean he's naive. He doesn't trust blindly. But he always leaves the door open for the possibility of redemption, because someone once did that for him, Goku, through the act of entrusting Gohan to him. That's it, empathy based on lived experience, the deepest kind of empathy. It's not pity, it's not theoretical sympathy. It's, I've been where you are and I know there's a way out, so I'm not going to close that door on you. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Piccolo technically never apologized. He never made a public declaration of remorse. He never said, I'm sorry for what I or my past self did. Some might argue that this is problematic. But think more deeply, what would be more meaningful? Words of apology, or a lifetime dedicated to doing the opposite of evil? Piccolo chose the second option. His entire life after birth became a story alive. Every person he saved, every child he protected, every moment he chose good over evil. It was his way of saying, I'm not that, I'm this. This raises an interesting psychological question. Do actions speak louder than words? In most cases, yes. Research shows that people assess sincerity more through consistent behavior than through verbal statements. But here's the nuance. This works for Piccolo because he did both. He didn't just talk about change, but he also demonstrated change through every action. It wasn't just empty promises, it was lived transformation. Let's examine Piccolo's relationship with power and responsibility. He is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. He could easily dominate planets, impose his will and rule through force. He has the power to do so. But he never considers these options. Why? Because he's learned something fundamental. Power without responsibility is tyranny, but power with responsibility is protection. He saw what his father did with power without morals. He saw the destruction and suffering caused when force is used unethically. And he made a conscious choice. His power would exist to protect, never to dominate. This aligns with the concept of prosocial power, using your advantages, skills, and strengths to benefit others, not to exploit them. It's the difference between a leader and a tyrant, between a protector and an oppressor. Another fascinating aspect. Piccolo is probably the most strategically intelligent character of the Z fighters. While others rely on raw power, Piccolo is always thinking 3 steps ahead, analyzing weaknesses, developing plans. This is no accident. It comes from the fact that he can't always rely on being the strongest. So he developed other ways to contribute, through tactical intelligence, strategic thinking, and cold analysis of the situation. In cognitive psychology, this represents a different type of intelligence than Goku has, instinctive combat intelligence. Piccolo has analytical intelligence, the ability to break complex problems into components, predict consequences, and plan several steps ahead. And here's the interesting thing. He never tries to force others to follow his plans. He offers perspective, gives advice, presents strategies. But he respects when others choose different paths. That's egoless leadership. Contribute your expertise without needing to be in absolute control. There's a moment that perfectly sums up Piccolo's evolution. In the Tournament of Power, when he fights alongside Gohan. They have perfect synchrony, absolute trust in each other. Gohan, now an adult, is no longer the child Piccolo trained. But the bond remains stronger than ever. And what's beautiful about that is that they became equal pairs. Piccolo is no longer just the mentor, he's the partner. He's allowed the relationship to evolve and mature. This requires letting go of ego, letting go of the know-it-all role, and embracing a more egalitarian dynamic. Many mentors struggle with this. They want to remain the authority permanently. Piccolo doesn't. He's genuinely proud when Gohan surpasses him. This is true parental love, wanting your son to surpass you, not keeping him down to protect your own ego. Let's talk about what Piccolo represents symbolically in the larger Dragon Ball narrative. He is the living proof that redemption is possible. No matter how dark your origins, no matter how terrible your beginnings, you can change. This isn't a superficial message. It's deeply important, especially for people who grew up in toxic environments, who carry family trauma, who feel doomed to repeat their parents' mistakes. Piccolo says, no, you're not. You can choose differently. Will it be difficult? Yes. Will it be lonely sometimes? Yes. Will people take a while to trust you? Probably. But it's possible. And it's worth it. This message has real therapeutic value in therapy. One of the biggest obstacles is when clients believe they are fundamentally bad or irreparably broken. Seeing someone like Piccolo, who was literally born as evil reincarnated, become a hero? It challenges that limiting belief. Another thing, Piccolo never had a chosen one who saved him. Yes, Goku was important, especially when he entrusted Gohan to him. But the real change? It came from within. Piccolo did the inner work, made the decisions, and faced his own shadows. This is crucial. No one can save you from yourself. You have to do this work. Other people can support you, they can believe in you, they can give you opportunities. But real transformation? Only you can do that. Piccolo never expected anyone to come up with a magic solution. He meditated, reflected, and made difficult choices consistently for years. This is the hard truth about personal growth. It's work. It's daily. It's tireless. But it works. Let's examine Piccolo's legacy in terms of impact. He didn't just change himself, he changed the world around him. Gohan became who he is in large part because of him. Pan is being influenced by him. Future generations will grow up knowing the story of the demon-turned hero. That's a positive intergenerational impact, breaking cycles of trauma and creating new cycles of growth. It's one of the most powerful things a human, or Namekian, can do. And consider the contrast. King Piccolo wanted a legacy of terror. He wanted to be remembered as the most fearsome, most powerful being. Piccolo, the son, will be remembered as the gentle mentor, the silent protector, the unlikely hero. Which legacy is truly more powerful? The second, obviously, because love lasts longer than fear. Construction lasts longer than destruction. Connection lasts longer than domination. There is one final aspect we need to address. Piccolo found peace. You see this in the way he carries himself in the more recent sagas. There's no longer that tension, that subsurface anger, that constant discomfort. He's comfortable with who he is. He's accepted his past, embraced his present, and is at peace with his future. That's complete psychological integration. All aspects of the self harmonized, nothing fighting against itself anymore. And this, perhaps, is Piccolo's true victory. Not defeating external enemies but conquering his inner demons, literally in his case. Not proving something to others, but proving to himself that he is who he chose to be. This peace didn't come easily. It took decades. It took sacrifice. It took constant work. But he got there. And that gives hope to all of us who are still on the journey, still wrestling with our own shadows, still trying to become who we want to be. Look, if you've made it this far, you're clearly not just passing the time, you're looking for something deeper, something that really makes you think. And I need to ask you, why haven't you subscribed to the channel yet? Seriously, think about it. How many channels do you know that do this? That take your favorite characters and truly delve into their psychology, showing how their battles reflect your battles, how their transformations can inspire your transformations. This isn't just another channel of random anime trivia. This is a journey of self-discovery using the stories you already love. And if you don't hit that subscribe button now, you'll miss out on insights that could literally change how you see your own life. Subscribe, like, activate the bell because Piccolo's story isn't over yet, and neither is your story. Let's continue this journey together. Press that button now because what's coming in the next few minutes will bring everything to a close in a way you won't forget. Now let's connect everything we said about Piccolo with something that directly affects your life, because at the end of the day, this isn't just an analysis of an anime character, it's about all of us. How many people do you know who carry guilt that isn't theirs? Children who feel responsible for their parents' mistakes. People who grew up in dysfunctional families and feel they're destined to repeat those patterns. Individuals who carry generational traumas they don't even know where they came from. Piccolo's story shows us something fundamental. You are not a hostage to your past. No matter what happened, no matter where you came from, no matter what they did to you, you always have a choice about who you will become. But, and this is crucial, this choice isn't easy. It's not a magical moment where everything changes instantly. It's a decision you have to make every day, sometimes every hour, sometimes every minute. Piccolo teaches us that transformation is daily practice, not a single event. Every meditation he did, every moment he chose patience over anger, every time he protected instead of destroying, these were small victories that, accumulated, created a massive transformation. Let's talk about something many people don't realize, the emotional toll of being the changer. When you come from a dark place and do the work of changing, people don't forget where you came from. They continue to see you through the lens of your past. And it hurts. It hurts so much. You can do 1,000 good things and people will still remember that one bad thing. You can save lives and they'll still whisper about who you used to be. Piccolo experienced this constantly. And do you know how he dealt with it? He stopped waiting for external validation and started validating himself internally. He knew who he was, He knew the work he had done, he knew the choices he had made. And that had to be enough because external validation may never come completely. This is something many people on transformational journeys need to learn. You can't expect everyone to recognize your change. Some people will always see you through the filter of your past. And you have to make peace with that. It's not fair, but it's real. And strength comes from continuing to do the right thing even when it's not recognized, even when it's not applauded, even when no one is watching. Now, let's talk about transformational loneliness, a concept that isn't often discussed, but is extremely real. When you're undergoing profound change, you often feel alone even when surrounded by people. Why? Because you're not who you used to be, but people still treat you as if you were. You've grown up, but your relationships haven't grown with you. You see the world differently, but no one understands it the way you do now. Piccolo experienced this intensely. He changed fundamentally, but he continued to be treated as the former villain, the different one, the outsider. And this loneliness could have made him regress, could have made him think, why change if no one recognizes you anyway? But he didn't. He kept going. And eventually, not quickly but eventually, people began to see. They began to trust. They began to accept. The lesson. True transformation requires patience with others as much as work on yourself. People need time to adjust their perceptions. It's not malicious, it's simply how the human brain works. And you need to give it that time while keeping your changes consistent. Let's address something that a lot of people get wrong about redemption. The idea that you need compensate completely the past. That you need to do good deeds equivalent to bad deeds, as if there were a cosmic scale that needs to be balanced. Piccolo shows us that's not how it works. You can't undo the past. You can't erase what was done, or what was done before you technically existed in his case. All you can do is discuss differently from now on. It's not about mathematical compensation. It's about direction. It's about committing to a different path. And some people will accept that, others won't. But you're not doing this for the acceptance of others, you're doing it because that's who you choose to be. This frees many people who are trapped in cycles of guilt. You don't have to pay forever for past mistakes. You need to learn, grow, and do things differently. That's enough. It has to be enough, otherwise no one would ever be able to move forward. Another crucial aspect. Piccolo never tried to forget his dark past. He didn't repress it, he didn't deny it, he didn't pretend it didn't happen. He integrated it. There is a huge difference between forget and integrate. Forgetting is trying to erase something, sweep it under the rug, and pretend it doesn't exist. Integrating is recognizing, accepting, learning from, and incorporating that experience as part of your history without letting it dictate your future. Piccolo remembers being daimyo. Those memories are there. But he turned them into reminders. This is what I don't want to be. This is the path I don't want to follow. He used the darkness of the past as a contrast to illuminate the path ahead. You can do the same with your traumas, your mistakes, your difficult beginnings. Don't deny them. Don't pretend they don't exist. But also don't let them write all the future chapters of your story. Let's talk about self-forgiveness, because this is perhaps the hardest part of any journey of transformation. Piccolo had to forgive himself for being born the way he was, for carrying the memories he carried, for all the initial moments where he almost gave in to hatred. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean saying, it's okay, it doesn't matter. It means saying, this happened, it had consequences, I learned, and now I give myself permission to move forward without carrying this burden forever. Many people never manage to do this. They spend their entire lives punishing themselves, sabotaging themselves, keeping themselves small because deep down they feel they don't deserve more. This isn't justice, it's just prolonged suffering that doesn't help anyone. Piccolo shows us that you can acknowledge the gravity of the past and give yourself permission to have a different future. The two can coexist. They must coexist if you truly want to change. Now, something that is rarely discussed. The emotional cost of being the symbol of redemption. When you become an example of change, people start projecting their hopes onto you. You can no longer fail, you can no longer have bad days, you can no longer be human or Namekian. Piccolo carries this weight. He knows that many people see him as proof that change is possible. And that means he needs to maintain that standard, consistently, relentlessly. It's a kind of pressure that can be suffocating. But here's the balance he found. He lives by his own convictions, not by the expectations of others. Yes, he is aware that he is an example. But he doesn't act well because he needs to be an example, he acts well because that is who he is now. This is a crucial distinction. If you change just because you want others to see you differently, your change is fragile. It depends on the audience. But if you change because you've genuinely become someone different, that change is solid. No one can take that away from you. Let's address something uncomfortable. Not everyone will celebrate your transformation. Some people actually preferred you the way you were before. Maybe because your old self made them feel better about themselves. Maybe because your change confronts them about their own choices not to change. Piccolo saw this. Not all the characters were completely comfortable with his change. Some always maintained that cautious distance. And he had to accept that some relationships would never be completely free from the shadows of the past. And that's okay. You don't need everyone's approval. You need self-respect, inner peace, and a few key people who truly see you. The rest? It's secondary. Here's a hard truth. Transformation often means temporary loneliness. You may need to step away from old environments, old people, even old hobbies that kept you stuck in old patterns. Piccolo did this literally. He meditated alone, trained alone, and spent long periods of time in isolation. Not because he hated people, but because he needed that space to solidify his new identity away from old triggers and patterns. Eventually, he was able to return and engage with others from a stronger place. But that period of cocooning, of isolating himself to transform, was necessary. And many people trying to change avoid that. They want transformation without discomfort, without loneliness, without the difficult period in between. It doesn't work that way. The butterfly needs time in the cocoon. You need it too. Finally, let's talk about hope, because that's what Piccolo's story truly offers. If someone literally born as the reincarnation of a demon can become a hero, a protector, a beloved mentor, then there's no such thing as a hopeless situation. It doesn't matter how low you've fallen. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter where you came from or what they did to you, there is always a way back. There is always the possibility to choose differently from now on. But here's the secret no one tells you. You have to choose that path that even when you don't see the final destination. Piccolo didn't know, in the early days of his transformation, that he would eventually become a beloved hero. He only knew he no longer wanted to be the villain. And that was enough to get him started. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to see the end of the road. You just need to know the next right step and take it. And then the next. And then the next. And one day you look back and realize, you've become someone completely different. There is a question that Piccolo's story forces us to confront, and it is a question that has no easy answer. When do you stop paying for past mistakes? For Piccolo, technically they weren't even his mistakes, they were Daimao Piccolo's. But he carried that debt as if it were his own. And even after decades of heroism, of sacrifice, of consistently doing the right thing, there was still that shadow that, but he was. This perfectly mirrors how our society treats people who have changed. We say we believe in redemption and second chances. But in practice, we keep bringing up people's past. We keep defining them by their worst moment, not their entire journey. And this creates a systematic cruelty. If you're never going to be seen as changed, no matter how much you change, what's the incentive to change? If you're always going to be treated like the villain, why not be the villain? Little show us the answer. You change not because others will forgive you, but because you need to forgive yourself. You change not to clear your name, but to be able to look in the mirror. You change because living with hate, with guilt, with darkness, it eats away at you from the inside in ways that no external validation can fix. Let's talk about a powerful psychological concept. Post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that trauma, however terrible, can be a catalyst for profound growth. It's not that trauma is good. Trauma is always painful. But it is possible to extract growth from it. Piccolo experienced this. The trauma of being born hated, of carrying memories of atrocities, of being rejected from his first breath. It could have destroyed him. And for a time it seemed like it would. But he transformed that pain into fuel for transformation. He took all that pain of not being loved and decided, I will love others so well that they never feel this pain. He took all that experience of being judged for the worst and decided, I will see the best in people, I will give them the chance they didn't give me initially. This is emotional alchemy, turning lead into gold, darkness into light. And it's available to anyone willing to do the work. But, and this is important, this transformation does not remove the original pain. Piccolo still bears scars. He still experiences moments of loneliness, self-imposed isolation, and discomfort with belonging. The wounds have healed, but the scars remain. And that's okay. Healing doesn't mean erasing. It means learning to live fully despite the scars, or sometimes even because of them, because they taught you things you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Now, something that a lot of people doing transformation work need to understand, you will have bad days. Days where you fall back into old patterns, where you feel old anger, where you question whether you've really changed. Piccolo has this too. You see moments where he gets irritated, impatient, where that flash of his old temper appears. And that doesn't mean he failed, that the transformation wasn't real. It means he's a living, complex being, with all the layers that implies. Transformation is not becoming a saint. It is becoming consistently better, not perfectly good. It's responding to anger with deep breathing most of the time, not all of the time. It's choosing compassion more often, not exclusively. This understanding frees you from the trap of perfectionism. You don't need to never make mistakes again, never experience negative emotions again, never fail again. You just need to stay on track, even with zigzags along the way. Let's talk about something that is simultaneously beautiful and sad in Piccolo's story. He will never have the childhood he lost. He will never experience being a child, being cared for, being loved unconditionally during his formative years. That was gone. No amount of Dragon Balls could ever bring that back. And he had to come to terms with that fundamental loss. He had to find a way to be a functional adult without having had the childhood that builds functional adults. And he did this, in part, through restorative parenting, giving Gohan and then Pan everything he never had. Through caring for them, he healed something in himself. Not completely, never completely, but enough to move on. This applies to anyone with difficult childhoods. You can't go back and have the childhood you deserved. But you can reparent yourself, give your adult self the care, patience, and compassion your child self didn't receive. And you can give future generations what you didn't have, breaking cycles. Another dimension. Piccolo is, fundamentally, about conscious choice versus unconscious programming. He was born programmed for evil, memories of destruction, impulses of domination, hatred encoded in his DNA. But he took conscious control. He examined those impulses, questioned those memories, and chose differently. This required immense mental effort. It was like constantly rowing against the current. And here's a hard truth. Some people have to work much harder than others to be good. Because of genetics, because of trauma, because of environment, some of us have impulses, thoughts, patterns that make ethical behavior more difficult. It's not fair, but it's real. And Piccolo exemplifies someone who had to actively fight against his own programming. And he did so day after day for decades. This isn't weakness, it's monumental strength. If you struggle with bad impulses, intrusive thoughts, patterns you hate, you're not weak. You're fighting a battle many don't even know exists. And the fact that you keep trying? That's true heroism. Let's address something that many self-help channels don't talk about. Not every transformation has a happy Hollywood ending. Piccolo has changed, improved, become a hero. But he's still lonely. He's still different. He still carries emotional weight. Is he better than he was? Absolutely. Does his life have more meaning, more connection, more purpose? Yes. But has he achieved complete happiness, total acceptance, perfect peace? No. He has achieved something more realistic. Enough peace, enough purpose, enough connection. And enough isn't resignation. Enough is wisdom. It's recognizing that the perfect life doesn't exist, but a good life, a meaningful life, that exists and is within reach. You don't have to wait for perfect happiness to start living. You don't have to solve everything before giving yourself permission to try. You work with what you have, build from where you are, and accept that better is a legitimate victory even without being perfect. Here's something few people notice. Piccolo is one of the bravest characters in the series, not because he fights monsters, everyone does that, but because he fights himself consistently and wins. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting rightly despite fear. And Piccolo is constantly afraid of returning to his former self, afraid of disappointing Gohan, afraid of being defined by the past. But he acts rightly despite those fears. This is the courage we all need to develop. Not the courage to fight external dragons, but the courage to face our inner demons, our shadows, the parts of us that we would rather not exist. And you don't conquer those demons once and that's it. You conquer them every day. Every time you choose differently. Every time you take a deep breath instead of exploding. Every time you choose connection over isolation. Each small victory adds up until you look back and realize, you've become someone you barely recognize. Finally, here's the real deal from Piccolo's story. Permission not to be defined by the worst moment of your life. Permission to change even when change seems impossible. Permission to take all the time you need. Permission to have scars and still be a hero. If you're carrying guilt that isn't yours, if you're struggling with inherited patterns, if you're trying to be better but feel alone on this journey, you're not alone. Piccolo walked this path before you. And he came out the other side not perfect but better, stronger, more himself. And you can get there too. Now let's talk about something that closes everything we've discussed. What Piccolo's journey teaches us about authentic identity versus imposed identity. From birth, Piccolo had an imposed identity. You are the devil, you are the reincarnation of evil, you are what everyone fears. This wasn't his choice. It was simply the label the world placed on him before he could decide who he wanted to be. And here's the cruel part, he believed that label for a while. He looked at those expectations and thought, well, if everyone says I'm the bad guy, I must be the bad guy. That's what we call internalization of stigma, when you absorb external judgments and they become your own inner voice. How many people do you know who are experiencing this? The child of an alcoholic who believes they will become an alcoholic. The abused child who believes they are damaged. The person from a marginalized community who has internalized negative messages about their own worth. Piccolo's journey shows us that the first step to real transformation is to question those labels. Don't blindly accept what others say about you. Ask, is this really who I am, or is it what they made me? This question is revolutionary. Because once you realize that identity can be questioned, can be examined, can be chosen, everything changes. You are no longer a hostage to the script they wrote for you. But, and here's where a lot of people go wrong, building a new identity takes time. It's not about changing labels overnight. It's a gradual process of experimentation, discovery, trial and error. Piccolo experienced different versions of himself. He began as an avenger, tried his hand at conqueror, transitioned into a reluctant mentor, and eventually found his identity as a protector and chosen father. Each phase taught him something, building on the previous one. You can do the same. You don't have to know exactly who you are right now. You experiment, try things, see what resonates. And gradually, through many small choices, you discover not who you were programmed to be, but who you truly are. A fascinating aspect. Piccolo never tried to be human. He never tried to hide his Namekianness, never tried to completely adapt to earthling social norms. He maintained his essence, his difference, his unique nature. This is crucial. Authenticity does not mean conforming, it means being honestly yourself, even when you're different. Piccolo is proof that you can be accepted by being different, you just can't be accepted by being destructive. He kept his green appearance, his antennae, his Namekian habits, like not eating, only drinking water. He didn't hide his origins. But he changed his actions, his choices, his values. He separated cultural/biological identity of moral identity. This teaches something powerful. You can honor where you come from while choosing where you're going. You don't have to reject your heritage completely to change your destiny. You integrate what's valuable and transform what's destructive. Let's talk about selective vulnerability, something Piccolo masters perfectly. He's not vulnerable to everyone. He has layers, walls, protections. But with specific people, especially Gohan, he allows them to see through those defenses. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Indiscriminate vulnerability is dangerous, but strategic vulnerability with trusted people is essential for genuine human connection. Piccolo understands this instinctively. He knows that not everyone deserves access to his deepest parts, that not everyone will treat his vulnerability with care. So he chooses carefully who he opens up to. And this protects him without isolating him completely. If you have a history of being hurt when you were vulnerable, take a lesson from Piccolo. You don't need to open up to everyone to have meaningful connections. You need to open up to the right people. And who are those people? This takes time, observation, and small trust tests. Now, something that is almost never discussed. The grief that comes with transformation. When you change profoundly, you lose old versions of yourself. And even if those versions weren't good, you may still feel a strange sense of loss. Piccolo had to let the angry young warrior, the determined avenger, even the stern mentor die. Each stage of transformation required letting go of who he had been. And letting go, even when it's for the best, is still a kind of death. Our culture doesn't talk about this. We talk about letting go of the past, as if it were simple, as if it cost nothing. But there's a real mourning in change. A sadness for unrealized possibilities, for paths not taken, for versions of yourself that will never exist again. Piccolo allows himself to feel this. You see it in the quiet moments, in the thoughtful expressions. He doesn't regret changing, but he's also not in denial about the cost. That he honors all versions of himself, including the ones he had to leave behind. You can do the same. When you change, give yourself permission to feel the loss along with the gain. You can be happy with who you're becoming and sad for who you're no longer. The two can coexist. Let's approach resistance to change, because even when we want to change, part of us resists. Piccolo experienced this constantly. He had old impulses of anger, control, isolation. And he had to consciously choose against those impulses. This is normal and universal. Change means death of the familiar, even when the familiar is toxic. And our brains, designed for survival, fear change. The familiar feels safe even when it's hurting us. So you'll have that inner voice saying, Go back to what you know, at least there you knew how to navigate. Piccolo had that voice too. The difference, he recognized that voice as fear, not truth, and chose courage over comfort. When you hear that voice that resists change, don't fight it. Just acknowledge it. Oh, that's fear talking. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I choose growth even in the discomfort. Another crucial point, authentic change requires ego death. The ego is the part of us that wants to be right, to be admired, to appear good. And real change usually requires admitting that we were wrong, that we hurt people, that we are not who we pretended to be. Piccolo had to kill his ego repeatedly. He had to admit, at least to himself, that he was wrong about world domination, wrong about revenge, wrong about not needing anyone. Each admission was a small ego death. But here's the paradox. Through dying to the ego, you become more genuinely you without the layers of pretense, without the defenses of appearing a certain way. You find who you really are underneath. And that person is often much better than the persona you've constructed. Let's talk about consistency as a form of healing. Piccolo didn't have dramatic, "I'm cured" moments. He had decades of consistent choices building up to transformation. This is the reality of healing that no one wants to hear. It's boring, it's repetitive, it's day after day after day. There's no shortcut. There's no hack. It's simply choosing right over and over until choosing right becomes your default nature instead of a constant struggle. This takes years. And our instant gratification culture hates it. But it works. Boring consistency works better than sporadic intensity. Piccolo meditating every day for decades transformed him more than any single cathartic moment could. If you are impatient with your progress, remember, you're not late, you're in the process. Real transformation is measured in years and decades, not days and weeks. Keep choosing right. Keep showing up. Keep trying. Accumulation is inevitable. Now, something heavy, you can do everything right and still not be completely accepted. Piccolo saved the world multiple times. He raised Gohan. He protected countless lives. And yet there are people who view him with discomfort, who keep their distance. This is a hard truth. Some people will never give you credit for the change, and you have to make peace with that. Your transformation cannot depend on universal approval because you will never have universal approval. Piccolo made peace. He stopped expecting everyone to see him as he sees himself. He found satisfaction in knowing his own truth, in having the respect of the people who truly matter, Gohan, the Z fighters, and in living according to his values regardless of recognition. This is real emotional maturity. Define your value internally, not externally. Know who you are regardless of who thinks what about you. Let's talk about purpose as an anchor. What kept Piccolo going through decades of transformation? Purpose. To protect Gohan. To protect the Earth. To be the guardian no one asked for but everyone needs. Purpose gives meaning to suffering. It gives context to struggle. When you have a clear purpose, you can endure discomfort that would be unbearable without it. Piccolo endures loneliness, rejection, constant work, because he knows why he's enduring it. If you're struggling to maintain transformation, perhaps you need a clearer purpose. It doesn't have to save the world. It can be simple. Raise your children better than you were raised, break cycles of abuse, be a support for a specific person, develop skills that serve others. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It just needs to be of course, and it needs to be significant for you. Something that closes everything. Piccolo teaches us that real heroism is not perfection. It is direction. You don't have to be immaculate. You need to be consistently moving toward the best version of yourself. He has flaws. He makes mistakes. He has bad days. But the overall direction? Always forward. Always growing. Always choosing good over evil, connection over isolation, protection over destruction. That's all any of us can do. Not be perfect. Just be consistently better. Take one step at a time toward who we want to be. What if you stumble? Get up and take the next step. What if you fall behind? Acknowledge it, learn, and start over. There's no such thing as permanent failure until you permanently give up. And giving up? It's not an option while you're still breathing. So, after all we've talked about, what's the fundamental truth about Piccolo, the hero doomed to right a wrong that was never his? The truth is this: he was never condemned. He just believed that he was. And the moment he stopped accepting that condemnation, the moment he decided to write his own story instead of living the script they wrote for him, everything changed. Piccolo teaches us that condemnation is not destiny. Origin is not destiny. Trauma is not destiny. The only thing that determines your destiny is the pattern of choices you make day in and day out, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He was literally born as the devil reincarnated. If anyone had an excuse to be a villain forever, it was him. But he didn't use that excuse. He didn't hide behind, that's just the way I am. He said, no. I choose differently. And this choice, maintained consistently through decades, transformed the demon into a hero. It transformed the hated into the beloved. It transformed the destroyer into the protector. Not through magic, not through shortcuts, but through choices, one after another, until those choices became who he is. If you're watching this and carrying weight you shouldn't, family guilt, childhood trauma, expectations others have placed on you, labels society has given you, listen to this. You don't have to carry this forever. Yes, it'll be work. Yes, it'll be lonely at times. Yes, some people will never recognize your change. But you know what? You will sleep at night knowing who you really are. You will look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. You will live the life that is your, not a script they wrote for you. And that freedom, that authenticity, that inner peace even without external validation, that is worth every second of the struggle. Piccolo proved that there is no such thing as too late, there is no such thing as too damaged, there is no such thing as too dark a past for transformation to be possible. That as long as you're alive, you have a choice. And as long as you have a choice, you have hope. But here's the final secret. You don't have to do it alone. Piccolo had Gohan. He had Goku, albeit in a complex way. Eventually he had the Z fighters. Transformation happens in the context of a relationship, not in total isolation. Find your people. Find those who see your potential even when you don't. Find those who hold you accountable but with compassion. Find those who celebrate your small victories, not just the big ones. And be that person for someone, because serving others on their journey heals something in you too. Piccolo's story isn't just about anime. It's about all of us. It's about every human being fighting shadows, striving to be better, carrying burdens that sometimes shouldn't be ours. That it's about the universal human journey of who we are versus who we choose to be. And the answer Piccolo gives us: choice matters. Choice always matters. No matter where you started, you can choose differently now. Now, if this analysis has touched you, if you want to continue exploring the deep psychology behind your favorite characters, I need you to watch the next video. Because what have we done with Piccolo? This is just the beginning. Imagine understanding Vegeta through the lens of complex trauma and toxic masculinity. Imagine deconstructing Goku and discovering whether he's truly heroic or just privileged. Imagine exploring Gohan and the pressure of unrealized potential. There is a whole universe of psychological analyses waiting for you. And here's why you cannot miss these videos. Because understanding these characters deeply isn't just about anime, it's about understanding yourself. Each of their struggles reflects your own. Each of their transformations illuminates your possibilities. Each of their journeys offers a map for your own growth. Then click on the next video now, not tomorrow, not later, now. Because the momentum you have, the emotional opening this analysis has created, this is the perfect time to dive deeper. And look, if you've made it this far, if you've read every word, heard every analysis, you're not looking for superficial entertainment. You're looking for meaning, transformation, deep understanding. And I'm here creating exactly that for you, video after video. Don't let this journey end here. Piccolo's story was just one chapter. But there's a whole book waiting for you. Characters, analysis, and insights that will change how you view anime, psychology, and your own life. Click on the next video. Continue this journey. Because if Piccolo's story has taught you anything, it should be this. Transformation happens one step at a time, but only if you keep walking. I'll see you in the next video. Let's continue this journey together. Click now. Your future self will thank you.